The crystalline towers of Zephyria Prime stretched toward the violet sky like frozen screams. Prince Kael'thas stood at the highest window of his palace, watching another shuttle descend through the swirling clouds. His 4 arms crossed behind his back, the ceremonial rings on his fingers catching the light from 3 distant suns. Another hopeful suitor had arrived, another soul eager to claim his hand and the throne that came with it. The prince's reflective black eyes showed no emotion. He had stopped counting the suitors after the first 100. Warriors from the militant Krex Empire, scholars from the Academic Consortium, diplomats from the Trade Federation, even a few mysterious figures from the Shadow Clans. They all came with the same goal. They all left the same way. Well, most of them left. The smart ones, anyway. "Your Highness," came a melodic voice from behind him. Lisa, his chief advisor, approached with careful steps. Her blue skin shimmered with bioluminescent patterns that indicated nervousness. "The new arrival has requested an immediate audience." Kael'thas turned slowly. His people, the Zephyrians, were known throughout the galaxy for their grace and deadly beauty. Standing nearly 8 feet tall with limbs that moved like flowing water, they had ruled this sector for millennia through a combination of advanced technology and an understanding of genetic engineering that bordered on the mystical. "Immediate?" The prince's voice carried harmonics that could shatter glass when he was angry. Today, he merely sounded tired. "How refreshingly arrogant. What species?" "Human, Your Highness." That gave Kael'thas pause. Humans were relatively new to the galactic community, having achieved faster-than-light travel only a few centuries ago. They were considered crude by most standards, barely above the barbaric Krex in terms of civilization. Their technology was primitive, their lifespans short, and their diplomatic skills questionable at best. "A human seeks my hand?" The prince almost smiled. "Have they been informed of the requirements?" Lissa's patterns flickered faster. "I explained the trial of worth, yes. They seemed unbothered by the details." The trial of worth. Every suitor who wished to court Prince Kael'thas had to face it. It was simple in concept, terrifying in execution. Deep beneath the palace, in chambers that had been carved from living stone over 10,000 years ago, waited the Shadar. The Shadar was not exactly alive, nor was it dead. The ancient Zephyrians had created it during the God Wars, when reality itself bent under the weight of cosmic conflict, part organic nightmare, part quantum entity, part something that had never been given a name, because speaking it would drive lesser minds to madness. It existed in a state between dimensions, fed on fear and pain, and had been bound to serve the royal family through rituals that required the sacrifice of entire worlds. For 3,000 years, it had guarded the most precious treasures of the Zephyrian crown. More importantly, it tested those who would join the royal bloodline. The trial was straightforward. Enter the Shadar's domain, retrieve the crown of binding from its lair, and return alive. Simple. In 3 millennia, exactly 0 suitors had succeeded. Most died screaming before they made it past the first chamber. The Shadar could sense thoughts, emotions, memories. It fed on them, twisted them, used them as weapons. The few warriors strong enough to resist its mental attacks found themselves facing a creature that could tear apart starships with its claws and move through solid matter like smoke. The clever ones fled before it was too late. The brave ones died with honor. The foolish ones, well, pieces of them occasionally turned up in the lower chambers, usually rearranged in ways that suggested the Shadar had a sense of humor. "Let them come," Kael'thas said finally. "I am curious to see how quickly this one runs." An hour later, the humans stood in the prince's audience chamber. Kael'thas had to admit he was surprised by their appearance. He had expected another hulking warrior like the Krex suitors, or perhaps a small, wiry figure like the Trade Federation diplomats. Instead, the human appeared remarkably average, about 6 feet tall, with brown hair and brown eyes, wearing what appeared to be a simple black uniform without insignia, no visible weapons, no obvious cybernetic enhancements, no signs of genetic modification. If not for the confidence in their stance, they could have been any of a billion humans working menial jobs throughout the galaxy. "I am Captain Sarah Chen," the human said, their voice carrying a slight accent that Kael'thas couldn't place. "I seek an audience with Prince Kael'thas regarding the trial." "You stand before him," the prince replied, studying this Sarah Chen more carefully. Now that she was closer, he could see small details. Calloused hands that spoke of hard work, scars on her knuckles from fighting, eyes that moved constantly, cataloging exits and threats with the efficiency of a born soldier. "I've been informed of the requirements," Chen continued. "I accept the challenge." "Do you understand what you face?" Lisa interjected, her patterns now flashing in deep confusion. "The Shadar is not merely a guardian. It is death given form, nightmares made real. It has destroyed beings that could level mountains with a thought." Chen nodded. "I've read the reports. 1,732 attempts over 3,000 years, 0 successes. Average survival time in the chamber, 4 minutes and 12 seconds. "And yet you still wish to proceed?" Kael'thas leaned forward in his throne. "Forgive my curiosity, Captain Chen, but why? What could possibly motivate a human to attempt something that has defeated the greatest warriors in the galaxy?" For the first time, Chen smiled. It was a small expression, but it transformed her entire face. "Your Highness, with respect, I don't think any of those warriors understood what they were really fighting. And you do?" "I have a theory." Chen's hand moved to her belt, and both the prince and his advisor tensed, but she only pulled out a small device, holding it up. "May I show you something?" Kael'thas nodded, and Chen activated the device. A holographic image appeared in the air between them. It showed a 4-legged creature with brown and white fur, sitting in what appeared to be a human dwelling. Its mouth was open in what humans called a smile, tongue hanging out, eyes bright with intelligence and joy. "This is Buddy," Chen said, her voice softening. "He's been my companion for 8 years. Golden Retriever mix, about 70 pounds, loves tennis balls and hates vacuum cleaners." Lissa's patterns shifted to deep purple confusion. "I don't understand. Why are you showing us your pet?" "Because," Chen said, deactivating the projector, "I think the Shadar has been fighting the wrong battle for 3,000 years. The prince leaned back in his throne. This human was either completely insane or far more intelligent than her species typically showed. "Explain." "Every report I've read describes the same pattern. The Shadar attacks with fear, with mental manipulation, with overwhelming physical force. It fights like a predator, because that's what it was designed to be. But predators have weaknesses, Your Highness. They expect their prey to run, to fight, to show fear. They don't know how to handle something that refuses to play by those rules. And you believe you can simply refuse to be afraid?" Kael'thas's voice carried a hint of amusement. "Captain Chen, courage alone is not enough. Many of those who died in the chambers were among the bravest beings in the galaxy." "Courage isn't what I'm talking about," Chen said. "I'm talking about purpose, pack mentality, loyalty that goes deeper than fear or pain or even death." She gestured to where the hologram had been. "Humans have lived alongside creatures like Buddy for thousands of years. We've learned things that I don't think the rest of the galaxy understands." Lisa's patterns were now flashing in rapid confusion. "You intend to bring this animal into the trial?" "No," Chen said firmly. "Buddy is safe at home, but he's been with me for so long that his scent is part of me, his pack loyalty, his absolute trust. It changes how I think, how I respond to threats. The Shadar might be expecting a warrior or a scholar or a diplomat. I don't think it's ever faced a pack leader. The audience chamber fell silent. Kael'thas studied the human for a long moment, his 4 arms moving in patterns that indicated deep thought. In 3 millennia of suitors, no one had ever spoken about the trial in these terms. Warriors talked of strength, scholars of knowledge, diplomats of negotiation. This human spoke of relationships, of bonds that transcended individual survival. It was either the most sophisticated psychological approach anyone had ever taken to the trial, or the most naive. "When do you wish to attempt the trial?" the prince asked finally. "Now, if possible," Chen replied. "I've traveled a long way, and I left someone at home who's probably wondering where I am." Kael'thas stood from his throne. "Very well, but I will warn you one final time, Captain Chen. The Shadar does not simply kill, it destroys. Soul, memory, everything that makes you who you are. If you enter those chambers, there may be nothing left to return to your buddy." Chen's smile returned, and this time it carried something that made even the prince take notice. It wasn't confidence or arrogance or bravado. It was the quiet certainty of someone who had never once considered abandoning a member of their pack. "Your Highness," she said, "you've never had a dog, have you?" The descent to the trial chambers took 20 minutes. They traveled in silence through corridors that grew older and stranger with each level. The walls changed from polished crystal to carved stone to something that might have been bone. The air grew thick with an energy that made reality feel thin, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. At the final level, they stood before a circular chamber carved from black stone. Ancient symbols covered every surface, glowing with a light that hurt to look at directly. In the center of the chamber was an opening that led down into perfect darkness. "The Shadar waits below," Kael'thas said. "The crown of binding is in its deepest lair. Retrieve it and return, and you will have proven yourself worthy of my hand and the throne of Zephyria." Chen nodded, checking her equipment one final time. She carried no weapons, no protective gear beyond a simple breathing apparatus, just the black uniform and whatever conviction had brought her across the galaxy. "One last question," the prince said, as she approached the opening. "If you survive this, what makes you think you actually want to marry me?" Chen paused at the edge of the darkness and looked back. "Your Highness, I've seen how you rule your people. Fair, just compassionate despite the power you wield. I've seen how you've refused suitors who were only interested in your throne, how you've protected your world from those who would exploit it." She smiled again. "Besides, anyone who's kept a creature like the Shadar fed and controlled for 3,000 years without it escaping to devour the galaxy, that takes the kind of responsibility I respect." With that, Captain Sarah Chen stepped into the darkness and disappeared. Above, Prince Kael'thas and his advisor waited. The chambers below were shielded against all forms of scanning or communication. They would know the result only when Chen either emerged victorious or when the screaming stopped. Lisa's patterns flickered nervously. "Do you think she understands what she's truly facing?" The prince watched the opening where the human had vanished. "I think," he said slowly, "that she may understand something the rest of us have missed." Far below, in chambers that existed partially outside normal space-time, something that had been waiting for 3,000 years lifted its massive head and tasted the air. The Shadar's consciousness was vast and alien, a patchwork of hunger and duty and predatory instinct. It sensed the approach of another challenger and began to gather itself for another hunt. But as the human descended deeper into its domain, the creature paused. Among the familiar scents of fear and adrenaline and mortal determination, there was something else. something warm and loyal and absolutely foreign to its experience. The scent of something that had never once considered abandoning its pack. The Shadar's hunt was about to become far more interesting than it had been in 3 millennia. The stairs descended far longer than seemed possible. Captain Sarah Chen had been walking down the spiral stone steps for nearly 30 minutes, and according to her small altimeter, she was now more than 2 miles beneath the palace. The air grew colder with each step, and the walls began to pulse with a faint, sickly light that seemed to come from within the stone itself. Chen's breathing was steady, controlled. 8 years of military service had taught her to manage fear, but this wasn't about fear management. As she descended, her mind drifted to memories of Buddy. The way he would greet her at the door after long deployments, his entire body wiggling with joy, how he would sense her moods and rest his head on her lap when she was sad, the absolute trust in his eyes when she told him to stay, even when every instinct told him to follow. The stairs ended at a massive archway carved with symbols that seemed to shift when she wasn't looking directly at them. Beyond the archway lay the first chamber of the Shadar's domain. Chen paused at the threshold, not from fear, but from respect. She was entering the territory of something ancient and powerful, and every instinct Buddy had taught her about pack dynamics said to announce her presence properly. "Hello?" she called into the darkness, her voice carrying clearly through the vast space. "My name is Sarah Chen. I've come for the crown of binding, as is my right by trial. I mean no disrespect to your domain." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Laughter echoed from the walls, but it wasn't joyful. It was the sound of breaking glass and dying stars and children crying in empty rooms. The Shadar's amusement rippled through dimensions, carrying with it the weight of 3,000 years of easy victories. "Another little mortal comes to play." The voice spoke without sound, arriving directly in Chen's mind like ice water in her veins. Another tiny spark to be extinguished. "Do you know what I am, little human?" Chen stepped through the archway into the first chamber. The space was enormous, cathedral-like, with a ceiling that vanished into darkness. Pillars of that same bone-like material supported impossible geometries, and the floor was covered in what looked like sand but moved like liquid mercury. "You're the Shadar," she said calmly, beginning to walk across the shifting floor. "You're a guardian created during the God Wars, bound to test those who would join the royal bloodline. You're very old, very powerful, and very lonely." The laughter stopped abruptly. Lonely? 3,000 years in these chambers with no one to talk to except people you have to kill, Chen continued, navigating between the pillars with steady confidence. "No wonder you draw out the hunts. It must be the only real interaction you get." The temperature in the chamber dropped 20 degrees in an instant. The sand beneath her feet began to writhe more violently, and shapes started forming in the shadows between the pillars. "You think to understand me, mortal? I am hunger given form. I am the space between stars where light goes to die. I am—" "Hurting," Chen said simply. The shadows froze. For a moment, the chamber was completely silent, except for the soft sound of Chen's boots on the shifting sand. When the Shadar spoke again, its mental voice was quieter, confused. "You smell wrong." Chen had reached the far end of the first chamber, where another archway led deeper into the complex. She paused and turned back toward the darkness where she could sense the creature's presence. "How so?" "You carry fear, as they all do, but beneath it—" The Shadar's consciousness probed at the edges of her mind, like cold fingers. "There is something else, something warm, something that trusts without question. His name is Buddy," Chen said, and for a moment her voice softened with affection. He's probably sleeping on my bed right now, waiting for me to come home. Show me. The command carried the weight of cosmic authority, but Chen didn't resist. She let her mind open slightly, sharing not thoughts, but feelings. The joy of coming home to unconditional love. The peace of having someone who would never betray her, never abandon her, never question her choices. The deep satisfaction of caring for another being whose happiness depended entirely on her. The Shadar recoiled as if burned. What is this? What manner of bond? Pack loyalty, Chen said, starting toward the second chamber. Humans domesticated dogs about 15,000 years ago. We've been learning from each other ever since. She entered the second chamber to find it filled with mirrors. Not glass mirrors, but surfaces that reflected things that weren't there. Some showed her greatest fears. Buddy sick and dying while she was away on deployment, her parents disappointed in her choices, her fellow soldiers falling in battle because of her mistakes. Others showed twisted versions of her memories, moments of happiness corrupted into scenes of betrayal and loss. This is my domain, little human. The Shadar's voice echoed from every surface. Here, I am your doubts made manifest. I am every mistake you have ever made, every moment of weakness. Look upon what you truly are. Chen walked through the maze of mirrors without slowing down. She glanced at each reflection, acknowledged what it showed her, and kept moving. These are just memories, she said. Some good, some bad. They're all part of what made me who I am today. You are not afraid of your failures? Of course I am, Chen replied, navigating through the maze with an odd kind of confidence. But being afraid of something doesn't mean running from it. Buddy taught me that. He's afraid of thunderstorms, but if I'm outside during one, he'll still come find me. In one mirror, she saw herself as a young recruit, failing her first combat simulation. In another, she saw Buddy as a puppy, chewing up her favorite boots while she was at work. Both memories made her smile. You find joy in failure? I find joy in learning, Chen corrected. In growing, in the fact that both Buddy and I became better because we didn't give up on each other. The mirrors began to crack. The Shadar's confusion was palpable, filling the chamber like a physical presence. This makes no sense. You are weak, mortal, fragile. How can you feel such certainty? Chen reached the exit to the third chamber and paused. Have you ever had a pack, Shadar? I am a singular being. I am alone, Chen finished. I know. But imagine if you weren't. Imagine if there was someone who loved you not because you were powerful or ancient or terrible, but just because you existed. Someone who would wait for you, who would miss you if you were gone, who would never stop believing you would come home. The crack in the mirrors spread, and several shattered entirely. Through the breaks in the reflective surfaces, Chen could see something moving in the darkness beyond, something massive and impossible that hurt to look at directly. Such bonds are weakness, the Shadar said, but its mental voice lacked conviction. They make you vulnerable. They can be exploited. They can, Chen agreed, stepping into the third chamber. But they also make you stronger. When you know someone is counting on you, when someone's entire world revolves around your return, it changes what you're willing to endure. The third chamber was the largest yet, and it was not empty. Here, the Shadar had chosen to manifest more directly. The creature that emerged from the shadows was the size of a starship, a writhing mass of tentacles and eyes and teeth that existed in too many dimensions simultaneously. Its very presence made reality bend, and looking at it directly filled Chen's mind with images of cosmic horror that should have driven her insane. Then let us test these bonds, the Shadar said, its voice now a physical roar that shook the chamber. Let us see how much you are willing to endure. The attack came from all directions at once. Tentacles that phased through matter wrapped around Chen's limbs, lifting her into the air. The creature's alien thoughts invaded her mind, seeking to shred her sanity with visions of universal entropy and meaningless existence. Its presence pressed against her consciousness like a collapsing star, trying to crush her sense of self into nothingness. Chen closed her eyes and thought of Buddy, not the heroic version, not some idealized memory, but the real dog. Buddy stealing food from the counter when he thought she wasn't looking. Buddy bringing her his leash every morning, tail wagging with the eternal optimism that today might be the day for an extra long walk. Buddy's disappointed expression when she had to leave for deployment, and his absolute explosion of joy when she returned. The Shadar's assault faltered. "What are you doing?" "Remembering who I'm going home to," Chen said, and her voice was steady despite being held 20 feet off the ground by something that existed partially outside reality. "Remembering why I'm here." The tentacles around her began to loosen, not from any external force, but because the Shadar was curious. For 3,000 years, its victims had responded to pain with fear, to mental invasion with resistance, to hopelessness with despair. Chen was doing something different. She was responding to everything with love. "You are thinking of the creature," the Shadar said, and there was wonder in its terrible voice. "Even now, facing destruction, you think of it." "His name is Buddy," Chen corrected gently. "And yes, I think of him. How could I not? He's part of me now." The creature lowered her to the ground, its massive form settling into a more stable configuration. For the first time in their encounter, it seemed uncertain. "I do not understand this connection. How can attachment to a lesser being grant strength?" Chen straightened her uniform and looked up at the Shadar without fear. "Because it's not about power. It's about purpose. Buddy doesn't make me stronger because he's useful or because he can fight beside me. He makes me stronger because loving him taught me what I'm really capable of." "Explain." "Before I met Buddy, I thought courage meant not being afraid," Chen said. "But that's not courage. That's just ignorance or stupidity. Real courage is being afraid and doing what needs to be done anyway. And the strongest motivation for that kind of courage isn't duty or honor or even survival. It's love." The Shadar was completely still now, all its eyes focused on her. "Love. The way Buddy loves me isn't about what I can do for him," Chen continued. "It's not transactional. It's not based on my strength or my success or my worth as a warrior. He loves me because I'm his pack leader, his family, his whole world. And knowing that, it makes me want to be worthy of that love." "And if you die here, what happens to this, Buddy?" Chen's expression grew sad. "He'll wait for me. Probably for the rest of his life. Dogs don't really understand that their people might not come back." The chamber fell silent. The Shadar's massive form shifted, and when it spoke again, its mental voice carried something that might have been pain. "In 3,000 years, no one has ever spoken to me of love." "I'm sorry," Chen said, and meant it. "That must have been very lonely." I remember now, before the binding, before the chambers." The creature's thoughts turned inward, accessing memories that were older than most civilizations. "I had a companion, not like your buddy. Something else, something that existed between dimensions as I do. We were together before the war, before the binding spells, before I became this." Chen felt her heart break a little. What happened to them? The war took them. The same conflict that created me destroyed everything I cared for. The Shadar's form began to shift again, becoming somehow smaller, less overwhelming. "I have been alone ever since." "I'm so sorry," Chen said and took a step closer to the creature. Losing a pack member. There's no pain like it. You speak as if you know. My first dog was named Rex. Military working dog, my partner for 3 years. He died saving my unit from an ambush. Chen's voice was quiet, respectful. I still miss him. The Shadar made a sound that might have been a sob if cosmic entities could sob. I had forgotten. The binding, the duty, the endless years. I had forgotten what it felt like to care for another being. Tell me about Buddy, the creature said suddenly, urgently. Tell me about this bond that gives you such strength. Chen smiled and began to talk. She told the Shadar about finding Buddy at a shelter, about training him, about the way he had helped her recover from the trauma of losing Rex. She spoke of morning walks and evening movies on the couch, of the way Buddy would bring her his favorite toy when she was sad, of how he had learned to sense her nightmares and would wake her gently with a cold nose to the hand. As she talked, the Shadar listened with an attention that was almost desperate. Its form continued to shift, becoming less monstrous and more something else. Not human. Not even close to human, but something that carried a profound sadness and a growing understanding. This bond, the creature said when she finished. This love you share, it is not weakness. No, Chen agreed. It's the strongest thing I know. And it is what brought you here. Not ambition or duty, but love. Chen nodded. I want to be worthy of his faith in me. I want to be the person he already thinks I am. The Shadar was quiet for a long time. When it spoke again, its mental voice was different, clearer, more present, as if it was remembering how to be more than just a guardian, more than just a weapon. The crown of binding lies in the chamber beyond, it said finally. But I would ask you something first, Sarah Chen, who loves Buddy. What is it? When you return to the surface with the crown, when you marry the prince and become royalty, will you remember this conversation? Will you remember that monsters, too, can be lonely? Chen looked up at the ancient creature, and her answer was immediate and certain. I could never forget. Pack loyalty works both ways, Shadar. It means never leaving anyone behind. The final chamber was nothing like what Captain Sarah Chen had expected. Instead of another test or trial, she found herself in a space that seemed to exist outside of normal reality entirely. The walls, if they could be called walls, shifted between solid stone and star-filled void. The floor beneath her feet felt both ancient and newly formed, as if it remembered being cosmic dust and dreamed of becoming a garden. At the center of the chamber, on a simple pedestal of what looked like crystallized moonlight, sat the crown of binding. It was beautiful in a way that hurt to perceive directly. Not made of any single material, it seemed to be woven from light and time and possibility itself. As Chen approached, she could feel its weight. Not physical weight, but the burden of 3,000 years of tradition, of power, of the responsibility it represented. Take it, the Shadar said, its mental voice now carrying a strange gentleness. The creature had not followed her into this final chamber, but its presence could still be felt, less overwhelming now, almost friendly. Chen reached for the crown, then hesitated. Are you sure? This feels too easy. Easy? The Shadar's amusement rippled through dimensions, but it wasn't mocking. Sarah Chen, you have done something that no being in 3,000 years has accomplished. You have reminded me that I am more than my pain, more than my duty, more than my isolation. You have given me the greatest gift possible. What gift? Hope, the creature replied. For 3 millennia, I have been convinced that connection was weakness, that caring led only to loss. You have shown me that loss does not negate love. It transforms it into something stronger. Chen lifted the crown from its pedestal. It was lighter than she expected, warm to the touch, and it seemed to pulse gently like a heartbeat. As soon as her fingers closed around it, she felt a strange connection, not just to the crown, but to the entire history of Zephyria Prime, to the royal bloodline, to the responsibilities and joys and sorrows of leadership. "I have a request," the Shadar said as Chen turned to leave. "Of course. When you become queen, and you will, for no one who has passed my trial can be denied the throne, remember our conversation. Remember that even the most powerful beings can be lonely. And perhaps—" The creature's voice carried a hope so fragile it was painful to hear. "Perhaps you might find a place for an old guardian in your new kingdom." Chen stopped walking and turned back toward the presence she could feel but not quite see. "Shadar, would you like to meet Buddy?" The silence that followed was so complete that Chen wondered if she had somehow broken the ancient entity's mind. When it finally responded, the mental voice was very small. "He would not fear me?" "Buddy's never met a being he didn't eventually win over," Chen said with a smile. "He's very persistent. And if I explained that you were my friend, he would accept you as Pack." Pack. The word carried wonder, as if the Shadar was tasting a concept it had thought lost forever. "Pack," Chen confirmed. "No one gets left behind. No one stays alone if they don't want to be." The return journey through the chambers passed in a blur. The mirrors in the second chamber now showed scenes of hope instead of fear, Buddy playing in the gardens of the palace, Prince Kael'thas laughing at something Chen had said, the Shadar's presence as a gentle guardian rather than a terrible threat. The first chamber's shifting sands had formed themselves into patterns that looked almost like flowers. When Chen emerged from the archway at the bottom of the stairs, Prince Kael'thas and advisor Lissa were exactly where she had left them. The prince's 4 arms uncrossed as he saw the crown in her hands, and his expression shifted from resignation to amazement. "Impossible," Lissa breathed, her bioluminescent patterns flashing in rapid disbelief. "She actually—" "How?" Kael'thas interrupted, rising from the throne he had brought down to the chamber entrance. "How did you survive the Shadar?" Chen held up the crown of binding, its crystalline surface catching the light in impossible ways. "I made a friend." "A friend?" The prince's voice carried harmonics of confusion. "The Shadar is not capable of friendship. It is a weapon, a guardian, a force of nature bound by ancient magic." "No," Chen said firmly. "It's a being who has been alone for 3,000 years, convinced that caring for others only leads to pain. Sound familiar?" Kael'thas went very still. "What do you mean?" "Your Highness, with respect, when was the last time you allowed yourself to care about another person? Really care, not just as a ruler for subjects, but as one being for another?" The prince's reflective black eyes studied Chen carefully. "My position requires loneliness," Chen finished, "just like the Shadar's position required isolation, but it doesn't have to be that way." She held out the crown to him. "I won your trial, but I think we need to renegotiate the terms of the victory." "Explain." "I didn't come here to win a throne," Chen said. "I came here because I saw a leader who was worthy of respect, someone who cared about their people enough to endure isolation rather than risk making the wrong choice in a marriage. I came here because I thought we might build something together." Kael'thas accepted the crown, his long fingers brushing against hers as he took it. "And now?" "Now I think there's a third member of our pack who needs to be included in those plans." As if summoned by her words, the temperature in the chamber dropped. The walls began to glow with that sick light Chen remembered from the trial chambers. and a presence made itself known, vast, ancient, and surprisingly gentle. Your Highness. The Shadar's mental voice touched all three of them simultaneously. I wish to request a modification to my binding. Lissa stumbled backward, her patterns flashing in pure terror. Even Kael'thas tensed, though he held his ground. Shadar, the prince said carefully, you have not communicated directly since the binding ritual 3,000 years ago. What do you want? To serve willingly rather than under compulsion, the creature replied. To guard not out of magical obligation but out of choice. To be part of something larger than duty. The silence stretched for nearly a minute. Finally, Kael'thas spoke. You wish to be, what? A citizen? A member of the court? I wish to be Pack, the Shadar said, and its mental voice carried an emotion that none of them had expected from an ancient cosmic entity. Hope. Chen stepped forward. Your Highness, I propose a new kind of alliance. Not just a marriage between our species, but a partnership that includes all beings who choose to be part of it. Humans have been learning about pack dynamics for 15,000 years. Maybe it's time to share those lessons. You want to teach pack loyalty to a galactic civilization? Lissa managed to speak despite her terror. That's impossible. Most species are solitary by nature or have rigid hierarchical structures that leave them vulnerable to exactly the kind of loneliness and isolation that has kept this sector in conflict for millennia, Chen interrupted. Think about it. How many wars have been fought over resources that could have been shared? How many alliances have failed because beings couldn't trust each other? How many leaders have made terrible decisions because they were too isolated to see alternatives? Kael'thas was quiet for a long moment, his four arms moving in patterns that indicated deep thought. You're suggesting that humans could serve as... what? Pack mediators? Teachers? Partners, Chen corrected. Humans aren't perfect. We have our own conflicts, our own failures, but we have learned something about loyalty that transcends individual survival. We've learned how to care for other species, how to build relationships based on trust, rather than dominance. It could work, the Shadar added, its mental voice growing stronger with excitement. I have seen the memories of wars fought in this sector. So many could have been prevented if the participants had understood pack loyalty rather than individual or species supremacy. And what about your binding? Kael'thas asked the creature. The magic that holds you here is woven into the very foundations of the palace. Magic can be modified, the Shadar replied, especially when all parties consent to the change. I do not wish to be free to leave, Your Highness. I wish to be free to choose to stay. Chen smiled. It's the difference between a guard dog and a family dog. Both will protect their people, but only one does it out of love. The ceremony took place 3 days later. It was unlike any coronation in Zephyrian history, and certainly unlike any wedding. Representatives from dozens of species attended, drawn by rumors that something unprecedented was happening on Zephyria Prime. Prince Kael'thas stood at the altar wearing the crown of binding, which had been modified with human engineering to include a small holographic projector. Captain Sarah Chen stood beside him in a dress that somehow managed to be both elegant and practical, with hidden pockets for the various tools she never traveled without. Behind them, visible only as a shimmering in the air but radiating a presence of gentle warmth, stood the Shadar in its new role as voluntary guardian of the realm. And on the altar, projected in perfect three-dimensional detail, sat Buddy. The golden retriever mix had been somewhat confused by the request to sit and stay, while his human talked to a floating projection device. But he had dutifully remained in position for the entire ceremony. His tail wagged constantly, and his tongue hung out in the universal expression of canine happiness. This union, the officiant intoned, represents more than the joining of two beings. It represents the creation of a new kind of alliance, one based not on conquest or transaction, but on the bonds of chosen family. As the ceremony concluded, delegates from around the galaxy witnessed something that would change interspecies relations forever. Chen knelt down and called to the projection, "Come here, buddy." The real dog, safely on Earth but visible through quantum entanglement technology, bounded forward and began licking the air where his human appeared to be. The gathered aliens watched in fascination as this supposedly inferior species displayed a level of joy and loyalty that many of them had never seen. "This is pack loyalty," Chen explained to the assembly. "It's not about strength or intelligence or usefulness. It's about choosing to care for each other, to protect each other, to never abandon each other. And it's something that any being, regardless of species, can learn." The Krex ambassador, a warrior who had lost 3 separate bids for the prince's hand, stood slowly. "You claim this pack loyalty can be taught to species that did not evolve with it?" "I claim that any being capable of choice is capable of love," Chen replied. "The question isn't whether you can learn it. The question is whether you want to." Over the following months, the Palace of Zephyria Prime became the first interspecies pack dynamics academy. Beings from across the galaxy came to learn about loyalty, trust, and the strange human practice of caring for creatures that were not their own species. The Shadar proved to be an excellent teacher. Its 3,000 years of isolation had given it unique insight into the cost of loneliness, and its vast intelligence allowed it to understand how pack dynamics could be adapted to different species and cultures. Chen divided her time between her new royal duties and regular video calls with Buddy, who had become something of a galactic celebrity. His image was transmitted across star systems as an example of the pure loyalty and joy that the new alliance system sought to encourage. Prince Kael'thas, now King Kael'thas, proved to be a remarkably effective pack leader himself. His natural inclination toward justice and protection translated well to the pack dynamic, and his 4-armed hugs became legendary among visiting diplomats. But perhaps the most significant change came from an unexpected source. 6 months after the coronation, the Krex Empire, a militaristic civilization that had been at war with someone for over 1,000 years, sent a formal request to the Academy. Their message was simple. "We are tired of being alone. Teach us to be pack." Chen stood in the palace's new communications center, Buddy's image flickering beside her as she read the message aloud. Through the quantum link, she could see her dog's tail wagging at the sound of her voice, his eyes bright with the absolute trust that had started this whole revolution. "What do you think, Buddy?" she asked the projection. "Ready to help save the galaxy?" Buddy barked once, a sound of pure enthusiasm that somehow managed to carry across space and time to inspire hope in beings he would never meet. Behind them, the Shadar's presence radiated something it had not felt in 3 millennia. The warm certainty that came from having a purpose larger than duty, stronger than obligation. The certainty that came from being part of a pack. "I believe," the ancient guardian said, its mental voice carrying across the communication channels to reach beings throughout the galaxy, "that the humans have a saying about teaching old dogs new tricks." Chen laughed, a sound that was transmitted alongside the Shadar's words. "They do, but they also have a saying about every dog having its day." She looked out through the crystal windows of the palace, toward the stars where ships from dozens of species were traveling toward Zephyria Prime, carrying beings who had finally learned that strength came not from standing alone, but from choosing who to stand with. "And I think," she added, watching Buddy's image as he settled into his favorite position for a nap, "that day is just beginning." The transformation of galactic civilization didn't happen overnight. There were setbacks, misunderstandings, species that tried to exploit the pack dynamic rather than embrace it. But for the first time in recorded history, wars began ending not through conquest, but through negotiation, not through fear, but through the radical concept that former enemies could become family. And at the center of it all, in a palace that had once housed a weapon of cosmic terror, three unlikely friends worked together to spread the simple lesson that a golden retriever had taught to one human soldier: that love, once given freely, could transform even the most impossible situation into something beautiful. The prince's monster had indeed slaughtered all who entered, until it caught the scent of unconditional loyalty and learned that some bonds were stronger than duty, deeper than magic, and more eternal than the space between the stars. In the end, it turned out that the most powerful force in the universe wasn't energy or matter or time. It was the willingness to never leave anyone behind.